Welcome back to the deep dive. Ready to dive into something special today?
Always up for a deep dive. What are we looking at today?
Well, it seems like you've been sending me a lot about specialty coffee lately, so I thought, why not dedicate a whole deep dive to it?
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, you're clearly ready to level up your coffee game, and I'm here to help you do just that. We've got all these articles and research, so we're going to unpack what makes specialty coffee stand out, explore how different regions affect the flavors, and basically, by the end of this, you'll be a specialty coffee pro, ready to brew up some knowledge.
Let's do it.
Okay, so first things first, what exactly makes specialty coffee so special? We all know it's not just a fancy name, but what actually sets it apart?
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely more than just a marketing thing. One of the, I guess you could say, core values of specialty coffee is this focus on really high quality beans.
So we're not talking about this stuff in the supermarket aisle.
Right. Definitely not. We're talking only Arabica beans, and these beans are like seriously graded. They have to score at least 80 points on a 100-point scale. That's according to the Specialty Coffee Association.
Wow, 80 points. That's pretty strict. So it really all comes down to the bean quality. But what makes these high-scoring beans so special in the first place? Is it like the genetics of the bean, or is it where it's grown?
You know what? It's a little bit of both. It's this fascinating combo of nature and nurture. So Arabica beans, they naturally have more potential for flavor than other types of beans. But then the growing conditions really matter too. Things like altitude, the soil, how much rain they get, even how much shade. All that stuff affects the final flavor.
So it's like wine then. You know how they talk about terroir?
Yeah, exactly. It's like terroir for coffee.
All right, so we've got these high-quality beans, graded and everything. What else is part of this whole specialty coffee experience?
Another key thing with specialty coffee is traceability. So unlike your typical bag of coffee, with specialty coffee, you can actually trace the journey of those beans all the way back to the specific farm, or even the region where they were grown.
Oh, so that's where that whole single origin thing comes in.
You got it. Single origin coffees really let you experience the unique flavors of a specific region. It's like taking your taste buds on a trip. But even if you're not drinking single origin, specialty coffee still prioritizes knowing where your coffee comes from and being transparent about it, so you can feel a little more connected to your cup.
I like that. It's not just a drink, it's like a whole story.
Exactly.
But we know there's more to it than just the beans and where they're from. What about how those beans are processed? You know, after they're picked and all that.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, where the human touch comes in. Specialty coffee is all about processing those beans in a way that preserves all those amazing flavors. We're talking about things like picking the cherries by hand, only when they're perfectly ripe, sorting them to get rid of any bad ones. And then there are all these different methods for actually removing the outer layers of the cherry and getting the bean ready to roast.
Okay, hold on. Break that down a bit for me. I always hear terms like washed processing or natural processing, and I never really know what it all means.
That's a good question. It can be confusing. Basically, these processing methods are all about separating the bean from the fruit, and they really affect how the coffee ends up tasting. So the most common one is washed processing. They use water to pulp the cherries and then ferment the beans to get rid of that fruit. This gives you a cleaner, brighter cup of coffee with more of that acidity that we talked about. Like, think of those really bright, citrusy coffees from Kenya or Ethiopia.
Gotcha. So if I want that really crisp, refreshing coffee, I should look for washed processing.
Yeah, you got it. Now, the opposite of washed is natural processing. This is a much older method, where they just dry the whole coffee cherry out in the sun. So as the fruit dries, it ferments, and those fruity flavors soak into the bean. These coffees tend to be sweeter and have a heavier body, and you get those really intense fruit flavors, sometimes even with hints of wine or chocolate.
Wow, that's so cool. So natural processing is for the people who want a bolder, more adventurous cup of coffee.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's this middle ground called honey processing. So for this one, they remove the outer skin of the cherry, but they leave some of the fruit pulp on there while it dries. This creates a coffee that's sweet and smooth and full-bodied, but still has some nice acidity.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've covered high-quality beans, where they come from, and how they're processed. What else sets specialty coffee apart from the average cup?
Well, another really big part of it is sustainability and ethics. The specialty coffee industry really cares about fair trade practices, making sure that farmers are paid a living wage for all their hard work.
That's really important. So it's not just about a good cup of coffee, it's about making sure everyone in the process is treated fairly. But, you know, speaking of good coffee, I know that different regions are known for having their own unique coffee flavors. Can we talk a bit about that? Like, what makes an Ethiopian coffee different from, say, a Colombian coffee?
Oh, absolutely. Just like with wine, where your coffee comes from plays a huge role in how it tastes. It's all about the climate, the soil, how high up it's grown, even the traditions of how they farm the coffee in that area. All that comes together to create the different flavors we get.
Yeah, that's what I love about coffee. It's like you can travel the world through taste.
Exactly.
But I have to admit, it can be a bit overwhelming with so many different countries and regions producing coffee. Where do we even start?
Why don't we start with a classic, Africa? It's like the birthplace of coffee, and they have some of the most diverse and sought-after beans in the world.
Okay, a coffee safari. I'm in. What are some of the key countries in Africa that coffee lovers should know about?
Well, you can't talk about African coffee without mentioning Ethiopia. It's like the OG. A lot of people think that's where Arabica coffee first came from, and they have a really long and rich coffee culture. Ethiopian coffees are known for having all sorts of different flavors. Some are bright and citrusy, some are floral and delicate, some even have those wine-like notes we talked about earlier.
So when I see those tasting notes on a bag of coffee that say things like floral or winey, what does that actually mean? Like, what am I supposed to taste?
It's like a whole vocabulary of flavors.
Yeah.
Think of it like a flavor wheel. So floral could mean you're getting hints of jasmine or bergamot, even lavender, in the smell and the taste. And winey can mean you get notes of red wine or berries or stone fruits. It just adds a whole other layer to the coffee.
Okay, so Ethiopia is all about that variety of flavors. What other African countries should we be looking out for?
Kenya is another one that's really famous for its coffee. Kenyan coffees are known for their bright acidity, really juicy fruit flavors, and they have this unique black currant note that's almost like a signature for Kenyan coffee.
And what about the growing conditions in Kenya? What makes their coffee so unique?
Well, Kenya has high altitudes, volcanic soil, and a lot of small farms, often organized into cooperatives, and they really focus on quality and sustainability. So it's this combination of factors that leads to those really bright, intense flavors that Kenyan coffee is known for.
So it's not just the beans themselves, it's the whole system and the people behind it too.
Exactly. And if we head a little south, there's Rwanda. They've had a kind of coffee comeback in recent years. And Rwandan coffees are known for their delicate floral aromas, some sweetness, and they have really smooth, silky body.
Wait, silky body. What does that mean when we're talking about coffee?
It's about how the coffee feels in your mouth, like the texture and weight. So a silky body is smooth and luxurious, almost like a fine wine. And you often get that with washed coffees, which tend to have a cleaner feel.
Okay, I'm starting to understand how all these different factors affect the final cup. So we've explored some of the key countries in Africa, but what about other coffee regions around the world?
Well, South America is a continent that's known for its balanced, approachable coffees. A good place to start there is Colombia. They're one of the biggest coffee producers in the world, and Colombian coffees are known for being smooth and well-rounded, often with notes of caramel, nuts, and a little bit of citrus acidity.
Yeah, I feel like Colombian coffee is everywhere. What makes it so popular?
It's a few things, really. Colombia just has perfect conditions for growing coffee. High altitudes, rich volcanic soil, and plenty of rain. They also have a really good system for producing coffee, with a lot of farms focusing on quality and sustainability. So that all comes together to create a consistently high-quality coffee that most people just enjoy.
So it's a safe bet if you want a good cup of coffee. What other South American countries should we be checking out?
Well, Brazil is another giant in the coffee world. They produce the most coffee in the world, actually. Brazilian coffees are known for their chocolatey, nutty flavors, often with a bit of sweetness. They tend to have a heavier body and less acidity compared to African coffees, so they're good for people who prefer a smoother, mellower cup.
So if you're not a fan of that really bright acidity, Brazilian coffee might be a better choice.
Yeah, exactly. And then there are some smaller but equally interesting countries in South America. Guatemala, for example, has these coffees with rich chocolate and spice notes because of the volcanic soils and high altitudes. And Costa Rica is known for its bright, clean coffees with delicate fruit flavors and balanced acidity.
Wow, so many choices. We've got Africa and South America covered. What about Asia? I know they have a big coffee culture too.
Oh, for sure. Asia has a ton of different coffee-producing countries, each with its own unique thing going on. Indonesia, for example, is known for its full-bodied, earthy coffees with a distinct spice profile.
I've definitely heard of Sumatran coffee. What makes that one so special?
Sumatra is one of the main islands in Indonesia where they grow coffee. They have this unique processing method there called wet hulling. Basically, they remove the outer layers of the coffee cherry while it's still wet, and that creates a coffee with a heavier body and less acidity, often with earthy, spicy, even savory notes.
Wow, that sounds completely different from the African coffees.
Right. And then you've got Vietnam, which is a whole other coffee experience. Vietnam's the second largest coffee producer in the world, and they mostly grow Robusta beans. Robusta has more caffeine and a bolder, more bitter flavor compared to Arabica.
So Vietnamese coffee is for the serious caffeine addicts.
You could say that. They often brew it using a fin filter, which makes a really strong concentrated brew, and they traditionally serve it with sweetened condensed milk. It's a whole ritual.
Okay, that's on my list to try now. What about other Asian countries?
Well, India is another interesting one. They're known for their monsooned Malabar coffees. So they actually expose these beans to the monsoon winds during the rainy season, and that makes the beans swell up and develop a unique flavor. It's often described as earthy, musty, and a little bit spicy.
Wow, that's fascinating. I had no idea there's so much variety in the world of coffee. It's amazing how the geography, the climate, and how they process the beans all work together to create all these different flavors.
It really is. It shows you the power of nature and human innovation. But now that we've traveled the world of coffee origins, are you ready to talk about how to actually choose the perfect coffee for your own taste?
Okay, so we've explored all these different coffee origins, and I feel like I've learned so much. But
Hmm.
now comes the hard part, right? Actually picking a specialty coffee that I'm gonna love.
Yeah, it can be a little overwhelming with all the choices out there. But don't worry, that's what we're here for. We'll break it all down.
Perfect. I need all the help I can get. Where do we even start?
It starts with you, really. Your taste. What kind of flavors do you usually like? Are you into those bright, fruity, acidic coffees? Or do you prefer something more like chocolatey and nutty?
I am definitely a fan of the brighter, more acidic coffees. I love that citrusy punch.
Okay, good to know. So, if you're looking for that vibrant acidity, there are a few things you can look for when you're picking out a bag of coffee.
Like what?
Well, knowing your general flavor preferences is a great start. But let's talk about those tasting notes you see on bags of specialty coffee. I know they can seem a bit confusing, but they're actually super helpful.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I need a dictionary to understand them.
Haha, I get it. But think of it like they're giving you a vocabulary for coffee flavors. So words like floral, citrus, berry, chocolate. They give you clues about what that specific coffee might taste like. So you said you like citrus, right? Look for coffees that mention things like lemon, lime, grapefruit, even orange zest. Those are usually signs that the coffee will have that brightness you're looking for.
So it's like a little preview of what the coffee's personality is going to be like.
Exactly. They're not always perfect, but they give you a general idea. And besides those specific flavors, also pay attention to words like acidity, body, and finish. Those describe the overall structure of the coffee.
Okay, so acidity is that brightness. Body is how heavy or light it feels in your mouth. And finish is like how the flavors linger after you swallow.
Got it. What about the roast level? Does that matter a lot in specialty coffee?
Oh, it totally matters. The way a coffee is roasted can change the flavor a lot. Lighter roasts keep more of the coffee's natural flavors and acidity, so you get those delicate floral and fruity notes. Medium roasts are kind of in the middle. You get some of those origin characteristics, but also some roasty flavors. And then darker roasts, they bring out more of those smoky, roasted, sometimes even bitter flavors.
So if I'm all about those bright, citrusy flavors, a lighter roast is probably the way to go.
Most of the time, yes. Lighter roasts are usually the best for specialty coffees because they let those unique origin flavors shine through, but there are always exceptions. Some coffees actually taste better with a slightly darker roast to bring out certain flavors.
Okay, so roast level is definitely something to pay attention to. But what about how you brew the coffee? Does that make a big difference too? Huge difference. Different brewing methods bring out different flavors. So picking the right method for your coffee can really make or break the experience. For example, let's say you love those delicate floral notes in an Ethiopian coffee. A pour-over method, like a Hario V60 or a Chemex, would be perfect. Those methods give you a lot of control over the brewing and really highlight those subtle flavors.
So pour over is good for those lighter, more delicate coffees. What about something like a French press?
A French press is a great all-around brewing method, but it tends to make a heavier, more full-bodied cup with more sediment. So it's a good choice for coffees with bolder flavors like a Sumatran or a Brazilian, where you really want to taste those earthy, full-bodied notes.
It's like you have to match the brewing method to the coffee's personality.
Exactly. And then there's espresso, which is a whole other world.
Yeah, espresso seems a little intimidating.
It's definitely an art form. You need a really fine grind, the right pressure, and a short brewing time to get that concentrated shot of coffee. And espresso is usually used for milk drinks, like lattes and cappuccinos, but you can also drink it straight. It's a good choice for coffees with chocolatey, nutty, or caramel notes because those flavors can handle that intense extraction process.
Wow, a lot to think about. But I'm starting to see why people get so passionate about specialty coffee. It's like a puzzle, trying to figure out how all these pieces fit together to create the perfect cup.
It totally is, and it's all about experimenting and finding what you like. But besides the taste and brewing methods, there's another important thing to consider when you're choosing specialty coffee, and that's ethics and sustainability.
Right. We talked about fair trade earlier, but how can I tell if a coffee is actually ethically sourced?
Look for certifications like Fair Trade, Rainforest Alliance, or Organic. Those certifications mean that the coffee was grown in a sustainable way and that the farmers were paid fairly.
So those are good signs. Anything else I should be looking for?
See if the roaster or the coffee shop gives you information about the specific farms or cooperatives where they get their coffee. The more transparency, the better. It means they're putting in the effort to source their coffee responsibly and build relationships with the producers.
So it's not just about finding a coffee that tastes good, it's about making sure the whole system is fair and sustainable.
Exactly. And once you've found a coffee that you love, remember to store it properly to keep it fresh. Keep those beans in an airtight container, away from light, heat, and moisture.
Okay, I'm definitely going to remember that. I'm feeling a lot more confident about navigating the world of specialty coffee now. Any last words of wisdom before we wrap up?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Talk to your local baristas. Try different coffee shops. Explore different origins and brewing methods. There's a whole world of delicious coffee out there just waiting to be discovered.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into specialty coffee. I think we've all learned a lot today, and I'm personally feeling very inspired to keep exploring this amazing world of coffee.
It's been my pleasure. Cheers to good coffee.
Cheers, and to all our listeners, happy sipping.